So hi, everyone. As Ben mentioned, I'm Katrina Smart, VP of Digital Commerce at Mars United Commerce. So for this section, I'm going to talk to you about what organizational structure has to do with retail media success. And if you want to save 20 minutes, it has a lot to do with it. If you want to stick around, I'm going to split the session into two. And first of all, talk to you a little bit about the current state of play, provide some context and background, and then I'm going to invite Josh to join me up on stage and to pick his brain on the topic and delve a little bit further into it. So let's start by taking it one step further, looking at how we at Mars United Commerce view retail media, as this is really where the complexities in structuring retail media begin. So our definition is that retail media is any omni-channel commerce touchpoint bought directly from a retail media network. Now, that being said, it should, and I say should, because there are so many different capabilities across the different retail media networks. It should leverage the retailer's first-party data, off-site and on-site inventory, and closed-loop attribution capabilities. But is also inclusive of all of the omni-channel touchpoints too. But when we look at retail media, it isn't actually that new, and that's where the problem is. It's just become a lot more complex on both sides of the house for both the buy and the sell. Up until recently, it was quite nice and simple, and this is what it looked like. Everyone knew where they played. It was a simple model where your shopper team would work directly with activation and in-store execution. Digital would manage the e-commerce. Your sales team would manage the commercials and the JBPs, and your media and brand teams would normally work internally and with your agency partners as well. Now, each team had their own counterpart at the retailer that they worked very closely with. And now in this situation, it's nice and easy, right? But retail media evolved, and it's very much the evolution of shopper marketing. It's continually evolving, and from branded gondola ends and posters, where we started off in in-store sampling, all of the shelf edge point of sale, we've then moved into self-serve, tenancy placement, CPM-based models, right to where we are today, which is very much some of this off-site capabilities using retailer first-party data and all the promises that that allows. Now, looking at the progression in this, there are a couple of key factors as to where we're seeing some more of this organizational complexity. And one comes from the more recent capabilities we're seeing, where we're blurring the lines between upper and lower funnel in our more progressed capabilities. And number two comes from the stark contrast in media capabilities at each different retail media network, making it very difficult to structure accordingly. Now, this is the challenge we're in right now. So this is the current state of play. And the lines have been completely shifted. Retailers and their retail media networks are now coming to your media agencies and to your brand teams and asking for huge amounts of incremental investment to drive that upper funnel activity. Digital is firmly integrated as part of your plans and not just left as an afterthought as it once was, which is fabulous. Retail media spend is being included in part of your commercial JBPs in some retail media networks and not others. And your shopper team is now working on retail media activations that have previously sat very much outside of their remits. It's complex and it's messy. But the main issue here is that everyone is working in an individual silo. Now, we talk a lot about the siloed way of working that's hindering retail media success. And in terms of that, there's probably 5 key areas which are pulled out here. It drives a lack of connectivity. You might be losing leverage with your retailers. It duplicates media and audiences. You're missing out on opportunities. And ultimately, you might be creating a disjointed customer experience. So, how can you all start to combat some of this? We talk a lot about this buzzword in the industry, and actually, I'm surprised I haven't heard it more today. But across the industry, there's a lot of talk about this unified commerce. But what I hear is that most of the talk about it is external. And actually, I have a few questions for you to think about. And the first is, are you set up internally to drive a true unified commerce experience, right from planning through to conception? The second is, how does your internal structure align to your current and ever-changing retail media landscape? And have you provided your teams with frameworks, guidance, strategic investment planning across all of these different channels? Because you should ultimately be owning the retail media network conversation. These channels have grown hugely over the past number of years, and every time I look at this slide, it evolves and changes even more. And this doesn't even include some of the commerce media touch points and channels that we're now looking at with commerce and with banking and travel, etc., which are now blurring the lines between commerce and retail media. My third question is, how well do you know your retailers and their retail media networks? Now, this is a huge important factor when navigating retail media. And to ensure you get a view of what's happening at each retail media network, you need to really measure this internally. And actually, we start off within our own teams with our retail media report card. You can scan the QR code if you'd like to get the latest report. And this measures 5 key criteria which we feel are crucial to retail media success. So targeting, measurement and reporting, media opportunities, partnership and innovation. And when we work with our clients, we spend a lot of time looking at benchmarks, looking at creating frameworks for them, looking at understanding the capabilities at each different retail media network, because I guarantee you're not having the same talk that you're having at Tesco as you're having with an Asda or a Morrison's. Now, I wanted to make sure we touched upon our philosophy on retail media, because this is really where it pulls together some of those issues that we see in organizations at the moment between the brand pull and your commercial teams and shopper teams. So when it comes to our philosophy, the biggest thing to remember is that retail media does not equal media. It plays a very different role to brand media, with different jobs to be done, different calls to actions, different messaging, and different measurement KPIs. And we believe that retail media should be seen as retail plus media. So you need to ensure that you have a retail lens on everything you are doing, and retail media cannot be thought of in the same way as you do everything else. In order to achieve maximum results, you cannot manage retail media on its own. And in order to drive retail media success, it needs to be fully integrated as part of your total commerce plan in order to win. And with that, it means true alignment, working with your trade teams, with your e-commerce teams, with your in-store teams, shopper marketing teams, and your national media teams. And finally, before I invite Josh up to the stage, some last considerations that you should be thinking about when it comes to retail media success. You should be understanding and prioritizing your retail media networks. You cannot go after them all. So you should be understanding where you want to play and who you want to be playing with. Secondly, would be to consolidate your budgets and use your scale. Because when I ask this question, some of the biggest CPGs that we work with, do they truly know how much they're spending in one retail media network across each of those different silos? The answer is always no. Thirdly, you should focus on driving that true marketing alignment and de-siloing your internal teams. Fourthly, drive a test and learn agenda top down. It should be part of your strategic planning. I guarantee your shopper team won't know about an upper funnel retail media campaign that you recently ran with one of the big retail media networks. And finally, if retail media is part of your commercial agreements and JBPs, have you upskilled those members of the team in order to arm them with the ammunition that they need to talk about retail media? Do they know what it includes? Do they know the additional things they should be asking and leveraging? Do they know about return and relationship? So those are just some of the key kind of considerations we think you should take into consideration. And now, with that, I'm going to switch the conversation and take a seat with Josh. So Josh is the Global Retail Media Lead at Mars Wrigley. I'd like to introduce Josh. So Josh, welcome to the stage.
Thank you.
I thought we'd start off with doing a quick intro to yourself to everyone.
Hi everyone, I'm Josh. I'm the Global Lead for Retail Media at Mars Wrigley. And as Katrina has pointed out, that means I oversee a lot of chaos within our business. I sit on the media side, but we'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit.
Awesome. And so what I've done is prepared 5 kind of key questions that we thought about that I'd love to get Josh's opinion on, especially working with such a wide variety of brands in your background across e-commerce, digital, and now retail media. So, number one, Josh, so much of retail media is integrated in retail and trade agreements. How do you view the best way to integrate trade and commercial JBPs to drive success?
So I think the first question you've got to ask is, with the retailer that you're trying to partner with, how is their retail media network integrated with the commercial team? Because if that's not integrated, then actually your challenge becomes even larger. Then you need to ask yourself, if that relationship does exist, are you able to work in partnership around a brand performance, category growth kind of focus? Or actually is the retailer and the retail media network kind of just focused on driving some bottom line profitability for the retailer? Because those two have two completely different approaches. One, you can see a bit more as a listing fee because they're just after some profitability and they might, hold your hands a little bit and handcuff you. The other, you can actually build some really amazing partnerships with and start to deliver against true brand goals, manufacturer goals, whatever you're going for. So that would be the big one, is looking at what the retail media network relationship is like with the retailer, and then also considering what your relationship is like. The other part that you've talked about a lot, Katrina, is looking at how you can remove silos. Retail media ultimately brings together e-commerce, shopper marketing, and media teams, and potentially some more depending on how your organization is structured. So first of all, get your own house in order. The second thing you've then got to do is politely ask the retailer to get their house in order, because there's nothing worse than building a retail media plan that's potentially going to grow your sales by 20%, maybe it's conversion driven, and the commercial person isn't in the room, so they don't up by 20%. And then why did you spend all that money on media if the stock isn't with that retailer? So yeah, it's always about getting your house in order, but also working with the retailer to say, hey, it'd be great if commercial partners could also be in the room. So if we're having a conversation about what this is going to drive and deliver for our brand, we're making sure that we're not going to suddenly run out. Availability is the number one problem, right?
Yeah, super interesting. And, when you talk about the commercial and trade and the JBP agreements, a lot of it sits around budget and budget challenges. What have been the biggest challenges outside of budget, would you say, in a CPG organization when it comes to structural alignment?
I think it's probably linked a little bit. So differing P&Ls internally is always a problem, because you might try and structure it as, okay, old school shopper marketing was a bit lower funnel, so maybe I run my lower funnel retail media with the shopper marketing budget, I do the upper funnel stuff with the media budget, but that doesn't really work, because that doesn't actually give you a true kind of campaign that's going to deliver against your goals, unless you have 3 different campaigns that somehow join together. So there is always an investment challenge. The other part is around the KPIs, which is directly linked to it. The people in your organization, if they sit in the media team, they have very different KPIs to the ones that sit in the e-commerce team, to the ones who sit in the shopper team. Whilst your CFO might love the idea that you can deliver against all of these KPIs for the same amount of money altogether, that's just not a reality. So actually making sure you understand what is the campaign's aim, and that aim might be something that actually doesn't deliver against the KPIs of different people in your organization. So you're having to ask people, hey, this is not going to give you anything that you want, whether it's for your bonus, whether it's to deliver against what your department's after, but I still need you because we need to break down these silos. That's a real challenge.
Yeah. And in terms of that, have you, in terms of your brand experience, not just in Mars Wrigley, but across your other roles, how have you dealt with those challenges when it comes to KPIs and things like that? Has it been a difficult conversation?
Yeah, so a little bit of context. I'm apparently stuck in chocolate. So before Mars Wrigley, I worked at Lindt. Before that, a long time ago, I was at Ferrero. And outside of that, Red Bull. Sorry, I'll hide the Tenzin can. Red Bull and Kraft Heinz. So anything sugary and sweet that's in your cupboard is probably something I'd like to work on. At all those brands, I think there's always one aim, right? The companies always have the aim of brand penetration. Red Bull had it really well. They called it brand love and can love. Can we grow our kind of love of the brand, and ultimately does that drive penetration at the end of the day? And I really like that twofold mentality. That's what every team is ultimately contributing towards. So the challenge is really just getting that message across and saying, well, okay, yeah, realistically, this campaign is nothing to do with conversion. We're going to use a retail media network to drive off-site only. We're doing an experiment. Will there be a halo effect across the total market if we run it with retailer X? That's not really helping the shopper marketing team, but you might need their input to make sure that the comms they have in store are consistent with what you're trying to push. So, yeah, it's not easy, but I think ultimately every business is trying to drive towards the same thing.
I think it'll get easier the more we're all having the conversation.
Maybe.
question 3, we've heard a lot from retailers today, specifically on this stage about retail media, but in your view, how could retailers and retail media networks align better with brands to drive a better partnership?
Quick show of hands, was anyone in the session this morning with Boots, Tesco, etc.? Yeah, great, quite a few people. So they probably answered that question, but I made a few notes, and I think the retailers and the people on the stage offered some good things. So one is about measurement and getting that standardization, that holy grail that IAB told us was going to come 2 years ago, and I haven't heard much about since. Sorry if there's anyone from IAB. But I think standardization is one thing. The other thing is truly working in partnership. If we're testing stuff, let's test together. Don't ask me to test stuff and charge me a full rate card. I'd much rather test stuff with you. Katrina will get you up here as a retail media network and talk about it and how it's worked. That's much better than saying, I want to test stuff with you. The full rate card, off we go. That's not testing. That's not working in partnership. So I would push them to work in partnership. And I think from what we heard this morning, they're also looking for that. So actually, we're saying the same thing. We just need to figure out how to go about it and get the same thing that both parties want.
Yeah, there's definitely a happy medium there with both parties getting what they want from new and innovation. And then just finally, what are some of the key pieces of advice that you would give to, no, not just finally, there's one question left, but what key pieces of advice would you give to other CPGs as they're working through some of these organizational, structural challenges when it comes to retail media?
I think because the retailers have been building these media networks at such pace, a lot of the asks have come from that side of the fence, and that's great. I mean, we all know there's no magical money tree, so we do have to move the money around, but for CPG brands, I would say a couple of things. One is you don't need to completely restructure your org. It might make it simpler in the long run, but actually it's woefully complex in the short term. But be open to moving money around. Be open to sharing P&Ls. Plan further in advance so you know where that investment's coming from, whether it's coming from your media team, your marketing team, your shop marketing team, your e-commerce team. The further you can plan ahead and the further ahead you can bring the retail media network into that partnership, the more likely you are to succeed. The other thing I'd say is don't be afraid, firmly but fairly, to ask some things of the retailers. So right now I think everyone's very excited about off-site, but anyone that runs traditional media will know that there are a lot of safety measures in place for off-site media. You have brand protection, you have safe marketing guidelines, all of which your agencies and partners will work to uphold. That doesn't exist with a lot of retail media networks. So perhaps it's asking, do you have this? If they don't have this, it's saying, well, I wouldn't be able to advertise somewhere else where I don't have these brand protection rules. You're no different. I can't do off-site with you, and working with them so that they can build those capabilities in.
Yeah, great points. I think agility is key. Being able to have the flexibility internally to move things around and to make quick decisions when it comes to retail media. And then finally, and this time it is actually finally, has Mars adopted its organizational structure in any way to drive success with the growth we've seen with retail media?
Yeah, so Tash from Tesco this morning hit it on the head. There's a lot of CPG brands that are building new centers of excellence. They're bringing on key individuals to lead cross-functionally. That's why I've been brought on. I've only been with Mars for 3 months, so I've been brought on to be global lead for retail media on the media side, but Mars has also brought on someone to do that from the e-commerce side. And the reason for that is we know this is complex. We know that there are multiple stakeholders that are vying for control of this. Not everyone wants to pay for it, I'll admit, but they definitely want their skin in the game. So actually, by bringing 2 people on, Mars has been able to say, okay, we're going to effectively represent the 2 biggest key stakeholders for all of this kind of just above conversion right through to upper funnel. So yeah, two key partners on board, and we, Kelly and I, work hand in glove, as you know.
Yeah, amazing. Well, it's fab to work with you. And yeah, look forward to seeing some of the changes that CPGs are going to start making over the next year or so when it comes to retail media. Well, I think we're perfectly on time. We haven't been kicked off. So huge thank you, Josh. And thank you to everyone for taking the time.
Thank you, everyone.